Hello and welcome to another episode of Womoney Matters. It is my privilege to have on the show today a lady who is the Woman Marketer of the Year 2020, the Content Market Summit Asia Media Mogul 2020, and she is on the Exchange for Media Content 40 under 40 list. She currently works with Columbia Pacific Communities and heads their marketing division. She has worked in the media sector for over 15 years and is someone who has spoken very vocally about mental health issues. Please welcome Piali Dasgupta. Hi, Piali. Thanks for being here today.
Hi, Aarti. Absolute pleasure being here and being on Sridhan. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So, Piali, while you do have an illustrious introduction and one that a lot of people would envy, take us through your journey.
It's been quite a journey. Studied, communication. I did my master's in communication. Post which I actually took up a job in journalism. My first job was with the Times of India. That's where it all started. I was a fashion journalist there, but primarily writing on fashion and lifestyle. I spent about five and a half years doing journalism. A better part of the 5 years was actually spent in the Times Group. And post that, I decided to explore other facets of communication because I had a degree in communication, which sort of teaches you and exposes you to everything from brand communication to PR to corporate communication to advertising to new media and to journalism, right? So I didn't want to just kind of limit myself to one area of communication, which was journalism, and I took up a role on the brand side with Mintra, which was again a fashion communication role. And then post Mintra, I went to Amazon where I set up social media for Amazon Fashion. Post that, I went to agency side because that's again something that I wanted to explore for a long time, and I hadn't been exposed to the agency side of things. So I joined the Publicis Group as creative director, handling Aditya Birla fashion brands. And then from there, I actually decided to move out of fashion because by then I had done enough of fashion and I wanted to do something else. And when this opportunity came my way with Columbia Pacific, it was the right opportunity at that time for me. Because it allowed me to build something from scratch, which is something that I've always enjoyed doing. So it was about building not just a brand from scratch, but and really helping change perceptions around, senior living.
Wow, that's quite an interesting journey, Piali. Well, clearly, you've been very daring. I mean, if I may say so, in your journey, because you've not just moved jobs, you've also moved industries. And in my limited experience and in conversations that I've had with other women, it's generally not looked upon very well. So, how has your experience been with respect to switching not just jobs but also industries?
So I think the way that I look at it is that, if there is an opportunity that helps you grow both as an individual and as a professional, I think you should take it
Mhm.
and not worry too much about what others might say, whether others would see it as the right career move, the wrong career move, what traditionally people would have said about something like that, and everything else that sort of clouds our mind when we have to take bold decisions in life, right? Because
Right, right.
every time you want to take a bold decision, there are too many naysayers, too many people telling you not to do that because things might go really wrong,
Yeah.
because you might make a big mistake and then not know how to recover from that mistake. I think as long as you are convinced that this is the right thing to do and it is actually going to be for the better in terms of both learning and growth opportunities,
Mhm.
and just allow you to play on a larger canvas than the one that you're playing in currently, I think you should just go for it, is what I believe in. I have had a fairly unconventional, trajectory. Don't have too many people switching from journalism to other communication. Now, of course, that's happening quite a bit, I must say. But at that time, don't think it was happening very much. And similarly, when after about 12 plus years of fashion, I moved out of that category and I wanted to try my hand at something else, it wasn't as if I was not paranoid. It wasn't as if it was a very easy decision for me to make. It, of course, did fill me with a lot of anxiety, but I think that looking back, the amount of learnings that I've had here in terms of just exposure to just a new category and ways of thinking, I don't think that would have happened had I carried on with fashion, right? So I think it's always important for you to make those bold decisions at times that you feel are the right times, because sometimes
Mhm.
it's not the right time also. And I think it's important to constantly push yourself out of the comfort zone, because um, they say that nothing grows in comfort, right? I mean, it's a
Yeah.
great place to be, but nothing grows there. And I think that it's important to kind of nudge yourself every now and then, because if you don't give yourself that nudge, nobody else will.
So, what was it like? Because 5.5 years in journalism, and while I do believe it's a tough industry to be in, it comes with its perks in some ways, right? Because your journalism card is usually a nice, comfortable entry ticket to a lot of happening places. So, how was that shift for you? What did you go through? When you suddenly left print journalism, moved out. What was it like?
Can I just tell you that when I left the media, I sort of understood who my real friends were. And so I think in a way it was good, because when you're in the media, I think you get used to a lot of attention. You get used to people treating you like a princess, right? And rolling out the red carpet for you, and
Yeah,
you have free access to everything. You just have to name it and it'll be done for you. And you do have certain powers that you can actually take for granted. And when you're young, I mean, I was in my 20s when I was a journalist, and when you're that young, I think that um, you may not have the right perspective on things. You
yeah,
may not understand why people treat you the way they are. Are they treating you that well, or are they treating the publication that you represent that well? I
yeah.
think those are things that kind of, I mean, that perspective, I think you get only when you step out of journalism, right? And I think that also monetarily, I just, and I'm very candid and open about it. And I'm not one of those people that say that, oh, money is not important, and it's the job satisfaction, because I think that part of the job satisfaction actually does come from your remuneration, whether we like to admit it or not, but that's how it is, and there's no point in being
Absolutely.
hypocritical about it.
Yeah.
So I like to definitely say that journalism is not the most lucrative career out there. And then it's about the kind of life that you want to lead. I mean, are you okay with that, or do you have aspirations in life that you want to follow, as a result of which you might want to look at a switch in career? And I think that it's always, always, always a trade-off. There is nothing in life that is not a trade-off. And it was a trade-off that I sort of understood, and I knowingly and willingly kind of went into it. So I went into it with open eyes. I was not under any kind of misconception.
Switching jobs is one thing. Now you've switched industries, right? Um, as a woman, what kind of resistance did you face? Did you see this kind of thing which said that, oh, she's not from the industry, she must have very different experience? Does she even know what she's getting into? Did you see any kind of discrimination in your new profile because you'd come from a different experience set, so to say?
So yes, there was, there's always like a preconceived notion that people have, if you don't come from the same industry that they already belong to,
Hmm.
and you are an outsider. There is no two ways about it. And as any outsider will tell you, it's much harder for you to then
Break
get a
ground.
foot in the door, right?
Yeah,
When I moved from print to the digital side of things with Mintra, the manner in which you approach print is very, very different from the way you do digital. It could be fashion, but it's very different, right? And of course there was a lot of resistance, I remember, back then, and people saying that, oh, I did not understand digital, etc. But those are things at that point, it sometimes it can even be hurtful, because you can take some of those things quite personally. But looking
yeah.
back, I think that they had a point of view. And I mean, it is true that I didn't come from a digital background, and I had to learn everything from scratch. And I did it by obviously working way harder.
Through all of this, you were living alone in Bangalore, and it was, I think, not even the city you grew up in, so to say. So, what were the challenges because of that? Along with moving industries, changing jobs, seeing the true colors of people who call themselves your friends. How was it? I mean, how did you deal with all of that?
It's obviously not been easy, and it was not meant to be easy, and again, I mean, it's about choices that you make in life, right? And are you going to stand by those choices, or are you going to retract? I think it ultimately sort of boils down to that, right? And obviously, I mean, I had my share of struggles and tears and blood, sweat, all of that, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, I can't imagine what my life would have been had I not made that transition. It certainly wouldn't have been what it is now. Maybe it would have been better, maybe it could have been worse. I don't know what it would have been, but it wouldn't have been what it is. These are my choices. I made them. Nobody forced me to make these choices. Nobody held a gun to my head to say that, listen, move out. I made these choices, so, and therefore I have to stand by them, right? Because if I don't, then who will, right? But yes, of course, it's a lot of struggle. It's living in conditions and places that now, when I look back, I kind of I wonder how I did it. Like when you're in college and when you're kind of, you're living off your parents' money. You kind of live in like dormitories with 20 other girls. But that's what I think also made me. And I mean, when you're working, when you've just started working, you obviously can't afford a big house. And I mean, I've lived in like most humblest of sort of houses with not even like an attached bathroom and things like that. And so I've lived in all sorts of places, but I think that's really what um, gives texture to your journey and kind of makes it memorable. Because now when I look back, I kind of it's fascinating.
How did I do that?
And I think, yeah, it's like, yeah, how did I do that? But I wouldn't do it any other way.
So, what was your biggest challenge, Piali? Both career-wise and personally.
So I think that there is one grand challenge in my life which sort of transcends my personal and professional life to a large extent. I would say professional life as well, and that is something that I talk about actively, openly today. But even 5 years back, 6 years back, I would not open up about it. And that is the fact that I live with a mental illness which is debilitating. And I am a depression and anxiety survivor for over 23 years. I mean, I got it when I was very young, when I was in my early teens,
Hmm.
and I've lived with it ever since. It has not really gotten cured, but yes, I have had to find ways to kind of cope with it. All I'm going to say is that I've survived. It's been very tough, but I have survived because there's no other option but to survive. I think when you are mentally ill, and if you have any kind of mental illness, in my case it's depression and anxiety, everything is about 100 times tougher.
Yeah.
Everything that comes to people naturally, and everything that people do with a sense of ease, comes to me doesn't come to me naturally at all. So for example, socializing and being a people's person, and being somebody with a very sort of charismatic personality, the sort of person that when the person walks into a room, everybody sort of feels that energy or that aura or that presence or whatever. I'm not that person at all, you know so I think that is a direct fallout of the disease that I live with. And so I'd say that that's been the greatest challenge, because I do feel that if I was somebody with exceptionally good people skills, um, maybe I could have been somewhere else today.
But have you been
Not know.
forthcoming about your
Yeah.
mental illness before you've taken up a job? Have you actually discussed it with your potential employers in the past?
Oh, I absolutely have. And I've actually rejected jobs basis the kind of reaction I have seen from hiring managers when they have heard that I have a mental illness. There are two kinds of leaders: one that are um, extremely supportive and is willing to hear you out, although the person may not be mentally ill himself or herself, right? But
Yeah.
has a very high level of empathy and sort of tries to understand at least what your struggles have been like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And understands that you may have a very different point of view on things because your mind is wired very differently.
Hmm.
But there is another set of leaders that would be very distinctly uncomfortable even talking about it, you
Right.
know. And those are the ones that I think I wouldn't I've sort of not wanted to work with, because if your attitude to mental illness is that it's something that is a taboo topic and I don't want to talk about it even,
Hmm.
then I think it is an extremely problematic way of thinking, and you will never really understand me as a human being, and so maybe it's not the best thing to pursue that, for me.
How has all of this affected um, you monetarily? Like, how has it shaped your philosophy when it comes to money?
I don't want to name this company, but I was part of a really large organization where, I spent 2.5 years of my worst life, I think, in that organization. And at the end of that phase, I sort of had a complete breakdown of sorts. I had a mental breakdown of sorts where I just couldn't take it anymore. And my doctor said that, listen, you've got to make a choice between, do you want to work or do you want to live? Because if you don't live, you can't work. And where are your priorities right now? So post that, I of course quit that job. Sometimes you have to put uh, money as your, not as a top priority. It's very important. It's why we work. We all know how important it is for women to make their own money and to be independent and to actually be able to make choices in their lives that they want to make because they have the financial independence to do that, right?
Yeah.
I can't stress enough on that. And really, it is very important. But I think that there comes certain, a time in your life or certain situations that you perhaps find yourself in, where you have to get your priorities right, and you have to put your health first, and then think of your career. My life, with living with an illness and what it means monetarily. I think that you know there are things that you sometimes you want to do but you can't afford. For example, in case of mental illness, it would be something like a counseling session, which is very expensive in this country, which is very expensive anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
And it's something that's important for you to do
Mm.
if you have this illness. But sometimes you may not be able to afford it because it is quite prohibitive, right? And it's not for everybody. And I think that you want to be able to um, get to a point, whether or not you are mentally ill, where you are able to afford the basic necessities for yourself. And the definition of basic necessity is very different, and it differs from
Absolutely.
person to person.
Absolutely.
Because for you, for you, your basic necessity might be a 2 bhk house, right? But I may not want to live in a 2 bhk house, and for me maybe a studio apartment is fine. But my basic necessity could be that I want to go see a therapist once a week or once in 2 weeks, and I want to be able to pay for that, right? So the point is that irrespective of what you're going through in life, whether you have an illness, don't have an illness, whatever it is, if you're a woman and and is independent, wanting to be independent, my two bits on that is that you have to ensure that you're earning enough to be able to cover the basic requirements of your life, whatever the basic requirements you are to your life, right?
This
And
is
don't let anybody else decide.
this
Sorry.
is this is such an eye opener, because suddenly
Yeah,
you
I
are
mean,
redefining basic necessities, right? Today we're not just living in a world, so we're increasingly moving towards people not wanting to buy homes and stuff also, right? A lot of people are more comfortable keeping their assets liquid and in investments rather than putting it into real estate. uh, and you're talking about an age where the pressure on our minds is far higher than the pressure on our bodies. And therefore,
Exactly.
mental security for your mental health is so critical, right? Because what
Yeah,
you're
it is
making right now
absolutely critical.
is an open plea for people to allocate money to their mental health.
Absolutely. I mean, Aarti, so well put. This is exactly what I'm trying to say, and maybe, you've articulated it much better than I could have. But really, this is exactly the need of the hour. And I want to also say one more thing. Do not let others kind of define for you what is privilege. And
Yeah,
I've heard people say, oh, you're going to go see a counselor. Oh, that's so privileged. I mean, who are you to tell me what is privileged? I mean, that's ridiculous, right? Like, if I'm making my own money and if I'm going to go pay X amount of money to a counselor because I need to, I mean, that's my prerogative, Do not let anybody else tell you what is a privileged life, because, again, privilege also to a large extent is earned, right? We work really, really hard to earn our privileges. Of course, we've
absolutely.
been to good schools, good colleges, and that's obviously given us, let's say, an extra edge or whatever over people that may not have had that access. But privilege is something that's earned. It's not something that's served to you on a platter, because you're not really inheriting that. So the point is that, prioritizing self care and actually making provisions for that, because when we think of investment, Arti, and particularly in our country, this is a very Indian sort of scenario and typical Indian mindset, where investment means gold and piece of land and a house and
Yeah.
mutual funds and things like that, right? But investment is also on yourself. For me, my biggest investment is to travel, right? Of course, in the pre-corona days now, that looks like a distant dream, but when we could travel, I would make it a point to try and see at least 1 to 2 new countries a year, because that is what kept me going. That is what made life meaningful for me,
I'm so
right? And I
grateful for you
really,
right now, Piali. I'm really grateful for you because you are talking about money and investment, okay, and uh, security in a whole different perspective. It's a very different light because unlike most traditional mindsets, where we talk about security as being able to, have a house of your own and so much money in the bank for your next 7 generations, you're talking about three very critical things. Okay, you're talking about self growth. Okay, and that growth could be in the form of education, it could be travel, it could be picking up a new skill, right? So you're talking about growth, you're talking about sustenance of your self, right? Mentally and physically. Like, for example, someone who has other comorbidities, right? Someone who has, let's say, a diabetes problem or a kidney issue, and when they go for their dialysis sessions, or when they go to the gym, or they pay a nutritionist, that is okay. But paying a
yeah,
therapist for sustaining your mental
yeah,
health is a privilege.
yeah,
Okay, and
yeah,
just
yeah.
how different is your mindset when you're talking about that? As someone with, you know, like you said, a debilitating mental illness, to you, sustaining your mind, preserving your uh, sanity is the most important investment, because without that you can't even pick up a glass of water and drink it for yourself, right?
Yeah, and for me, that is self love. I mean, investing in myself and doing things that bring me joy. It could be small things that don't require any money, for example, painting, or very little money, for example, reading a book. But it could also be bigger things like, going on a trip, because I've earned myself that. And that's what motivates me to work harder, because I know that I can look forward to another trip 6 months from now. And that's really what
Absolutely.
makes me kind of go on. And I think that this whole sort of paradigm of um, what is good investment, right? What is considered good investment, sane investment. And I'm clearly not an expert on investments or money, but to me, the definition of good investment is what you're investing on your self growth, on self love, on nourishing your mind. And that's something that I think you shouldn't, women in particular, shouldn't feel guilty about. I think there is also a lot of guilt attached to self love, right? That, oh, am I,
Absolutely.
um, I mean, should I go for a spa? do I need
Totally.
it, right? Like
Totally.
expensive, and I could maybe use that money for something else. So particularly with women, I think there's a lot of guilt attached to it, and I think that the time has come to kind of move out of that kind of
To
zone of
destigmatize
thinking.
self-love,
Yeah,
self-preservation.
yeah, and to sort of prioritize it more than anything else, because
Absolutely.
it needs to be guiltless self love. That needs to, I think, be a priority. Even when you're kind of looking at planning investments, I think there needs to be provisions made for everything that falls under self love. It could be a spa session, it could be a trip abroad, it could be buying books, it could be anything that brings you joy, and
Mhm.
that to me is investment on myself.
That is really critical, because I think increasingly, as women play multiple roles, right? Women are also increasingly under more stress, right? Juggling multiple things, juggling your home and your families and your work. So if you don't invest in that piece of self sustenance, as I would like to call it, I don't think you're going to make it through the day. And as
Yeah.
women, we need to stop telling ourselves that, listen, I mean, I don't need this. I think it's very important to recognize the need, that when I do something for myself, it is not selfish. It is what is going to get me through to the next day or the next phase of my life. What kind of risk appetite do you have? Does it allow you to actually, uh, you know with whatever money that you do put away, does it allow you to take a little bit more risk, or are you very limited in your risk profile when it comes to your investments and how you save your money?
So, Aarti, like I confessed to you already that investments, financial planning, whatever it is that you like to call it, is not something that's my forte. And I'm not proud of it. But I also do feel, like you mentioned, since you mentioned risk, that because it's money, and if you don't understand it, it's best not to take that risk, right? Because if you don't have a fundamental understanding of, for example, mutual funds, just a random example, then it's probably best not to put your monies there if you don't really understand how it works and what kind of returns you can expect after 5 years. So because that knowledge is lacking in me, I'd say that I'm fairly risk averse.
You're not in the minority here, because that's exactly why Sweden exists today. It is a problem that we're trying to address, at a macro level, one video at a time, one message at a time. But I think the first step is the acknowledgement of the fact that we lack that knowledge, and the acceptance that it is a gap that we need to fill. So along with all the other things that we do for ourselves, increasingly, women like you who are willing to talk about it, I think will help drive home the message that we can all do better, whether it is about, with our money or with ourselves, with our minds. And learning never stops. Even if you're one of the most popular person in the world of media and content, irrespective of the accolades that you have and how big an achiever you are, I think if someone like you can have the humility to accept that, and to say that it is something you could do better with it, I think we all can. So thank you so much, Priyali. I think for me there have been massive takeaways today, not the least of which is that investment is not just in tangible assets and in pieces of paper that say you're so rich, but it is in how you feel every single day of your life. And if the women out there who are watching this can take a leaf out of your book and begin to feel less guilty about self-care and self-preservation, and therefore self-love, I think our purpose today would have been served. So, thank you so much for your time and for your generosity in sharing your life experiences with us. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Aarti. I mean, I should thank you for having me on this wonderful platform, and I must congratulate you for putting something this, important and pertinent together. And I think that platforms that allow women to come to the fore and express themselves freely and have a candid conversation without the fear of being judged, I think should be encouraged, and I'm really all for it. And I hope that this would be helpful to maybe just a handful of people that would watch it. I think that would be more than enough for me at least. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Piali, and all the very best. Please do keep inspiring all of us. And maybe we can all be a better version of ourselves every single morning that we wake up. Thank you once again, Piali, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aarti.